تو برای وصل کردن آمدی، نه برای فصل کردن آمدی. Perennial philosophy is a universal حكمة philosophy, and it has grown in different traditions. حيرة المحمدية manifesting itself to various prophets, and each prophet brings a certain aspect of wisdom. To put on a hat is a form of humility. To take off your hat is also a form of humility. So they share in wanting to be humble in the house of God. But the external manifestation of this sense seems to be opposite. It's not that we're all saints and they're all sinners. No, that's not true. But we believe that Islam, being the last revelation, has kept its teachings better than all other religions. How to accept other religions without losing the certainty of your own religion, without decreasing your iman, rather than Ali والحكمة الإلهية. And it shows that Ali is the founder of Islamic philosophical thought. There was a unique occasion that nearly had taken place since the Middle Ages, to have a scholar of the little Korban from the West to have these long discourses with a scholar from the East of the level of Allah Tawai, and he would read a Ghazal of Hafiz and comment upon it. The walls were all speaking. You cannot imagine. Every verse of Hafiz is a drop of metaphysical truth. That's in all the great teachers about Hafiz in Iran or elsewhere. Nobody could imagine. You could feel the presence of God in the forest. You could feel the spiritual presence. It was some khudur of divine grace, divine reality around you.
بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. أهلا وسهلا بكم في حيرة. نتشرف بالحديث مع الفيلسوف الإيراني البروفيسور السيد حسين نصر، وهو الآن بعمر 92 عاما. هو السيد حسين ابن السيد ولي الله نصر، ولد في إيران في طهران عام 1933 ميلادي، ووالدته من أحفاد الشيخ فضل الله النوري. حاز على الدكتوراه من جامعة هارفارد في الفلسفة الإسلامية في عمر 25، واتصل أيضا في شبابه مع ثلة من العلماء المسيحيين الذين أسلموا كريني جينون، الشيخ عبد الواحد يحيى، وفريدريك شوون، عيسى نور الدين وغيرهما. درس علوم الفلسفة والحكمة والعرفان الإسلامي في إيران عند كبار العلماء، لا سيما العلامة السيد محمد حسين الطباطبائي صاحب تفسير الميزان، وأسس في السبعينات مؤسسة الحكمة والفلسفة والتي هي مستمرة إلى يومنا الحالي. استقطب حينها نخبة من المفكرين الواعدين كالمفكر الياباني توشيكو إيزوتسو، والمفكر الفرنسي هنري كوربان، والمفكر الأمريكي ويليام تشيتك وآخرين، واستقطب الباحثين الإيرانيين المتميزين أمثال داريوش شيغان المتخصص في مقارنة الأديان وغيرهم. ساهم في إجراء الحوارات التاريخية التي حصلت بين العلامة الطباطبائي والمفكر الفرنسي هنري كوربان. ساهم كذلك في مشروع ترجمة التراث الإسلامي الروحي كدعاء كميل وككتاب الشيعة في الإسلام للعلامة الطباطبائي، وقد ترجم هذه النصوص البروفيسور الأمريكي ويليام تشيتك، وقد كان شابا حينها. هاجر إلى أمريكا عام 1979 وبقي فيها إلى اليوم، أي لمدة تزيد على 45 عاما، وصار أستاذا ومديرا لقسم الدراسات الإسلامية في جامعة جورج واشنطن في واشنطن. يتبنى مدرسة وفلسفة الحكمة الخالدة أو الفلسفة الخالدة. لديه الكثير من المؤلفات كالتراث الروحي للإسلام، لب الإسلام، قيم خالدة إنسانية في الإسلام، الفلسفة أرض النبوة، 3 حكماء مسلمين، السهروردي، ابن سينا، ابن عربي، أيضا الحاجة إلى علم مقدس، الفن الإسلامي والروحانية، الإنسان والطبيعة، حديقة الحقيقة، تأملات في التراث العرفاني للإسلام. وهذا الكتاب أيضا ظهر أمامكم حول أفكاره وسيرته. طبعا لديه مجموعة من الكتب أيضا التي ترجمت إلى اللغة العربية، يكتب بالفارسي وبالإنجليزي، وبعض كتبه كذلك مترجمة إلى كثير من اللغات منها اللغة العربية. تتشرف قناة حيرة بإجراء حوار خاص معه للإضاءة على بعض تأملاته، وخصوصا حول مدرسة الحكمة الخالدة وهو في هذا السن الكبير، ولعلنا نوفق لاحقا لحوارات أخرى للكشف وللإضاءة على جوانب أخرى من أفكاره وتأملاته. We are honored today interviewing Professor Seyyed Hossein Nasr. Assalamu alaikum, Professor, and thank you for giving us this opportunity.
والسلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته.
God bless you with good health. You almost lived a whole century. So after this long journey, what is the core lesson that you gained from your long experience with mystical, Sufi heritage, and spiritual studies?
This is a question that is very simple to answer in a sense. It's from that source that I was able to discover the ultimate truth of things, which is the heart of the Islamic revelation as well as of all authentic religions, and also a path that would guide me in my life towards God, towards the inner life, towards sapiential knowledge, towards what is most precious from my point of view in human existence. So it's been a central concern of my life ever since my very young days until today when I'm near the end of my life.
You're known with the perennial wisdom, Professor. So what's the main lesson that perennial wisdom school has to say to our modern day?
First of all, let me define this. The word perennial means that, of course, which is not bound by time, which continues, which is not eternal. Eternal is another level of reality, but it has a continuity in human life, in the world, and the perennial philosophy is a philosophy that claims that both the quest after the truth and the discovery of the truth have always been there from the very beginning of human existence. We do not believe that we ascended from the monkey. We believe that we're created by God, and when God created us, as the great Sufi and philosopher Sohrawardi said, he put a drop of perennial philosophy of Hikmah into our clay with which he was kneading us. And so it has been with us ever since we've been human beings from the origin. And that philosophy has manifested itself in various religions. The religions are new revelations from God. From the Islamic point of view, they're all really renewal of La ilaha illallah. We don't believe like some other religions, only one revelation. We believe that revelation began with Adam and ended with the Prophet of Islam. And through all of these revelations, what was central was the doctrine of Tawheed. No prophet of God ever taught a Thanawiyya, polytheism, dualism, and so forth and so on. They all taught Tawheed in one way or another. And God sent messengers to every people, as the Quran says. And therefore, there's a universality of revelation. And the perennialists believe that this should be taken seriously, that some of our Muslim contemporary brothers and sisters do not. They do not pay attention to this. Actually, Islam being the last religion of this great cycle that begins with Adam and ends with the Prophet, has always emphasized in its history, in traditional Islam. I'm a traditional Muslim, I'm not a modernist Muslim or a Wahhabi Muslim, I'm a traditional Muslim, has emphasized throughout its history the fact that God has said I more than once. I use this term. That is to various communities, to various ummas, and that there's not only one religion that is true, all the religions are false. I do not want here to get into the question of abrogation, that Islam abrogates all other religions. The religions were true when they came, when Islam they have become false. This has been answered extensively by myself and others, and it's a major theological, philosophical issue that on a television program one cannot really get into. But I can state here that the perennialists do not accept that. They believe that the perennial philosophy has always been there and will be there at the end of time. And each new revelation which comes from God reasserts at its heart the truth which is at the heart of the perennial philosophy. That is, there is a divine reality, the origin of everything. It is one. Everything comes from that reality. Everything returns to that reality. Those four statements that are made are shared in a sense by all religions. Some religions emphasize only one descent, one prophet, one avatar, one whatever you like to call it, one manifestation of God, whereas other religions, like both Islam and Hinduism, also emphasize it was throughout history, that in a sense, human history begins with revelation. Christians only emphasize the coming of Christ. They call Christ the second Adam, and then we come at the end of history. So it's Christ at the beginning, Christ at the middle, Christ at the end, but the historical Christ is only one figure. They don't pay attention to even the Hebrew prophets before Christ very much as prophets. They don't play that role like Abraham does in our religion, for example. We have prayers which included in Abraham, and dua or warith, which we Shiites recite all the time, as all the prophets named from Adam, one by one, name of each prophet until we get to our prophets, alayhi salatu wassalam. So anyway, there is this universality, which is in our own tradition, Islam, and the perennial philosophy is really the expression of that universality in a philosophical language. The word perennial philosophy, we're now speaking English together, began in the West only after the Renaissance. After, in fact, the West left its traditional moorings, modernism began. But through the writings of an Arabic, by the keeper of Arabic manuscripts of the Vatican Library, who found the term there and used it in Latin, Philosophia Perennis, and then the great German philosopher Leibniz made it very famous by saying that I follow the perennial philosophy, Philosophia Perennis in Latin. And after that, it became popular in the West, and different groups have claimed to be perennialists, and this has a whole history of perennial philosophy. But before the librarian of Vatican discovered that manuscript, he was given of Arabic manuscripts. We have to understand that the term came from Arabic into the West, and it was used for the first time, as far as we know, the term perennialism or perennial philosophy in the 4th century by Ibn Miskawayh, the famous Persian moral philosopher, Ibn Muskawayh, Persian, Miskawayh in Arabic, who wrote a book called Javidan Kharat, Perennial Philosophy. But the text is Arabic, but the title is Persian. And then the great philosopher, Sufi, Suhrawardi, wrote in Arabic, الحكمة الخالدة. الحكمة الخالدة was translated to perennial philosophy. Now, as far as the Islamic tradition itself is concerned, actually, not only the philosophical tradition, but also Sufism, in a sense, is based upon the same reality. The Sufis believe that origin of Sufism goes back to Ali ibn Abi Talib alayhi salam, and from him to the Prophet. That's a reality that came from the Prophet, the same way that the Sharia, God made him reveal it to the world. The Haqiqah or the Tariqah, which it comes to Sufism later on, most of it anyway, mostly Sufism, that came from actually revelation. But once it came, there was the belief that its truth had always been there. The truth of Sufism had always been there. It was not invented or suddenly appeared in 7th century Arabia when Ali ibn Abi Talib wrote the Najr al-Balagh or something like that. That it goes back, although Islamic Sufism comes from the heart of the Prophet to Ali and from Ali to a chain that continues to our own day. But what Sufism is, the relative Sufism, had always been there. And that's why the Sufis also claim the universality of revelation on that basis. It's a Sufi poem of Sheikh Mahmud Shabastari, one of the greatest Sufi poets, who says, چون صد آمد نود هم پیش ماست اسم احمد اسم کل انبیاست. When 100 comes, we also have the number 90. The name Ahmad, which is the inner Sufi name of the Prophet, is the name of all prophets. That's a remarkable universality, that the truth of God's revelation throughout human history, and not bound only to one community, one ummah.
So can we say حكمة جاويد يا حكمة خالدة, yeah, this perennial wisdom is another presentation of حكمة الإشراق of Sahrawardi and Ibn Arabi and Attar and Rumi and all this heritage that started with the Prophet and Imam Ali. So it is just a new representation for the inner and the spiritual path of Islam. Can we say that?
We can say that the perennial philosophy is a universal hikmah philosophy, and it has grown in different traditions. The Islamic tradition, from this tree, which is the background and the revelation of Islam itself, and its emphasis upon both aql and tanwir al-aql and nur, and the hadith about أول ما خلق الله النور أول ما خلق الله العقل أول ما خلق الله الكتاب, and so on, putting these all together as unity that descends from God. There had always been this awareness of the transcendental origin of Sufism and of Islamic spirituality, and that all Islamic spirituality really flows from one single divine source. I don't think that answers your question exactly. So I ask if you wanted more explanation.
No, I mean, so perennial wisdom is in the same context of حكمة الإشراق of Sahrawardi, but it is a new presentation with new terminologies that are more modern, I mean.
No. You see, this tree was there, this tree of hikmah, of esoteric knowledge, and it produced different branches or different new trees of wisdom, of knowledge, of which the school of Ishraq, Hikmatul Ishraq, is one of the most important, founded by Sahrawardi. Of course, within Sufism, there's the school of Muhammad ibn Arabi, that is the intellectual aspect of Sufism, which is associated with his writing, but the Fusus and the Futuhat, and especially the Fusus of Hikam. There's the school of Mullah Sadra, which appears a few centuries later. So different branches grow from this divine hikmah, but all of them confirm the truth of what we call the perennial philosophy. Some openly, like Sohrawardi, wrote about it, in fact, coined a term for it in Arabic on the basis of Persian, Javidan Kharad, Al-Hikmatul Khalida. Others, like Mullah Sadr, refer to it. And Ibn Arabi also speaks very, very extensively in the Fusus al-Hakam about the wisdom of the prophets, that in fact they come from a single reality, Hayratul Muhammadiyah, manifesting itself to various prophets, and each prophet brings a certain aspect of wisdom. So there's a kind of perennity in their continuity to the 27 chapters of the الحكمة.
Seyyed Nasr, all perennialists believe in transcendent unity of religions, and they believe also in religious pluralism. So, for example, Shawon or Rani Genon or all other great scholars that you were with them, they believe in religious pluralism. But I want to ask you, what is your personal interpretation and personal understanding of the issue of religious pluralism? Is it only that I have to open my eye to the wisdom and virtues in all traditions, or no, we are saying that all people have equal chances towards God, or no, maybe the Muslim will have a better chance, but other people also will have a chance? So what is your precise definition and understanding of religious pluralism?
Very precise definitions, but it says that there's more than one religion. They have more than one religion. Not that all are false and only mine is true. There are three possibilities. Either that all religions are false, that's the view of atheists and agnostics. There are plenty of them in the modern world. Every street is full of them. In the older days, they were rare, but now it's all over the place. The second is that only my religion is true, all other religions are false. That is held by many people, especially Christians, and some modernized Muslims, not in the old days. The Muslims believe in the Ahlul Kitab. They protected not only the Jews and Christians and the churches and synagogues, but also when they went to India, they protected Buddhism and Hinduism and so forth and so on. I won't get into that. That's the second possibility, as I said, is to say only my religion is true, all other religions are false, which we also have in the modern world. And the third is to say that all heavenly authentic religions are true. Now, the perennialists, people like Genon and Shuan, whom you mentioned, or Ananda Kumaraswamy, the great founders of the traditional school, the three of them, and others like Therese Burkhardt and Martin Lings and people like that, or myself, we believe that when the Quran says لِكُلِّ أُمَّةٍ رَسُولٌ, we believe in the Quran. That's serious. Yes, God has sent a messenger to all people. And we cannot say that all of these are abrogated by the coming of Islam. If that were so, why was it that the Muslims protected the property and the life of Jews and Christians amidst them for so many centuries? If they were false, how could the Sharia make the caliph or a king or some ruler or amir or someone like that protect the life and the property of the Ahlul Kitab? These modern Muslims believe that these are false, are insulting Islam. Because how could God order us to protect falsehood? What kind of God would it be, astaghfirullah? Why didn't it say that with the Jahiliyyah? When it's all protect the Jahiliyyah, let them keep their Wathan, the statues in the Kaaba and so on. No. The Jahiliyyah was erased completely from Arabia. But Christianity was not erased from Greece. 500 years, the Ottomans, the most powerful nation in the world for many centuries, ruled over Greece. And today, Greece is more Christian than France because Islam protected Christianity there, protected all the churches, all the tombs of saints, allowed the Christian to practice the Christianity. We don't have to go very far. All I have to do really study the history of our own religion seriously. To answer your question, I, for one, I believe in the universality of revelation, in tradition. I'm a traditionalist. And like Schuon, who wrote so brilliantly beautifully about this in his Transcendent Unity of Religions, a very classical book, shows clearly, intellectually, in fact, why it is that these various religions are really true. They're not saying opposite things when it comes to principles. It's when an application, they're meant for application, different humanities, different conditions, so they say different things. I always give this example to my students. I said when a Muslim goes into a mosque, he usually puts on his hat. When a Christian goes into a church, he takes off his hat. So, oh, these two religions are completely opposed to each other. No. To put on a hat is a form of humility. To take off your hat is also a form of humility. So they share in wanting to be humble in the house of God. But the external manifestation of this sense seems to be opposite. Now, we believe that religions are like that, authentic religions. First of all, in all religions, there are deviations and there are decadence, including our own religion, Islam, the last religion, which is the best preserved of all the religions of the world. Nevertheless, there are deviations of all kinds. When groups in Syria, in the name of Islam, invade other Muslims and kill 500 people, where is that said in the Quran and Hadith? All the things we're doing to ourselves. Don't we have any thieves in the Islamic world? Don't we have any people who commit adultery, to all the major sins of Islam? Yes, of course we do. So this kind of holier than thou attitude that some of us Muslims have doesn't come from humility and the love of God. It comes from a hidden pride. It comes from a hidden pride. Oh, so we're so good, you're so bad. No. There are plenty of thieves in every Islamic country. You can compete with your Western countries in these matters. It's not that we're all saints and they're all sinners. No, that's not true. But we believe that Islam, being the last revelation, has kept its teachings better than all other religions. Yes, other religions, many of them have forgotten certain of their teachings. Something have been put aside and things like that. Look what's happened to Catholicism the last few decades. After 2,000 years, so much of traditional Catholicism is put aside now, including the Latin Mass and many other things. Whereas in Islam, this has not happened. It's the last religion of the world. But that doesn't mean that it is, in a sense, talk about a truth that the other religions did not talk about. How could God be without adala, without justice? That's why I always tell the Christians. I say, you people, you say only Christianity is true, only Christ is the Son of God, and no other revelations, no other prophets, and so forth and so on. But where is the justice of God? Where is the mercy of God? All the millions of Chinese who had never heard of Christ for 1,000 of years, did they all go to hell? So the Christians have contrived theories of, although they don't know about Christ, but the cosmic Christ who indirectly guided them, and this kind of thing. Of course, this is just to cover up this problem. We don't have that problem in Islam. If you're authentic Muslims, if you read the Quran, or it says to every people who have sent a prophet, كُلُّ أُمَّةً رَسُولٌ. I'm not Nabiyyun, Rasulun, messenger. A messenger, that means bringing a law, divine law, not only a spiritual message, because we have difference between Rasul and Nabi in Islamic thought, and that's another story.
Great. So you mentioned one main proof that Islam told us to protect churches and temples, and also to respect the rituals of other traditions. What other proofs can be mentioned here also about pluralism? So, okay, I'll respect their churches, I'll respect their rituals, but that doesn't mean that they are true or on the correct path, or maybe I should guide them also. So I respect them because I'm a human and I have ethics. So, but maybe I should guide them to me, to my. So, what other proofs also are mentioned here in this regard?
For a Muslim, first of all, Judaism and Christianity and the Sabaun, whomever they were, the many interpretations of what the Sabaean were, are mentioned in the Quran. So you don't have to ask, how do we know? How do we know? We come to the question of religions not mentioned in the Quran. Let's say Buddhism, although Dol Kefl is probably a reference to the Buddha in the Quran. But Buddhism is not mentioned as a religion in the Quran, nor is Hinduism, nor is Confucianism, nor is Taoism, and all the great religions of Asia. How do we know that they are true or not? This is the first question you ask. The external answer would be put inside the internal theological question. The internal answer would be any religion which has survived for millennia, which has had followers who followed it devoutly, could not be created by Shaitan. God will not permit that. Something divine in it. Something that for a pseudo religion can come for a short while, can attract a few people, but because error is always possible. But how could God, who's merciful, allow a whole civilization like that of China or of Japan to last for thousands of years in error, in darkness? Shintoism is false, Buddhism is false, Confucianism is false, Taoism is false, so they're all living in error. I, for one, do not believe in that, and the Quran, if you really look at it, doesn't believe in that either, because that would make God very unjust. Astaghfirullah. One of the primary attributes of God is justice. Adl is essential to our understanding of Allah Ta'ala. So this is the external aspect of it. Internally, inwardly, and that's why the writings of people like Firuzan are so important. But we looked at the inward teachings of these religions. It's remarkable unanimity. There's a single voice. There's speaking the same truth, but in different languages. One says Allah, one says God, one says Brahman, one says Tao. But when you look at what they're referring to the same reality. God is one, but called by many names. In the Quran, says, "Lillahi al-asma al-husna," al-asma al-husna in plural. Of course, in the Quranic context, it means all different names of God, Ar-Rahman, Ar-Rahim, Al-Ghafur, Al-Karim, and so forth. But it could also mean other names which are not in Arabic, which other religions have. And that's why the Sufis have always emphasized that calling God by any name is to call God. And Jalaluddin Rumi has a very beautiful poem which talks about this, of a cobbler who was sitting down and calling upon God and says, "Where are you so I can fix your shoes and rub your feet," and things like that, and using very anthropomorphic terms for God. And Moses gets very angry that he does that, and he comes and says, "What is this? You're kufr, what you're saying?" And anyway, criticizes him severely. So the poor cobbler remains quiet. Immediately, God calls Jibreel. So it says, "Call Moses." And what have you tell him what great sin he has performed in silencing the prayer of my choice creature. And then, of course, Jibreel does that, and Moses goes and apologizes. And Rumi has Jalaluddin Rumi, since you know Persian, also a beautiful, one of the most beautiful poems of the Masnavi. God addresses Moses. Says, "To برای وصل کردن آمدی. نه برای فصل کردن آمدی." You have sent thee in order to bring about union, not in order to bring about separation. our point of view, Sufi point of view, is to protect religion wherever it is, if it brings people closer to God, closer to divine reality. Not to say you have to be one of ours in order to be good. No, you have to be one of His in order to be good, God's. And this is what we need today more than ever. In the old days, this was not necessary because each religion was a world unto itself. It didn't have to bother with theology of other religions, exceptions would come. When Islam met Hinduism in India, when Christianity met Islam in Spain, there were occasional exceptions when there were debates between theologians, but by and large, if a devout Egyptian living in Cairo and a devout Copt who's a Christian living next door, they might even be friends. They would never discuss theological matters and Trinity and unity and things like that. They belong to the same culture. But modernism has brought this about. Modernism now necessitates this kind of discussion. You and I would not need to have this discussion if we were living in Oman 500 years ago or in Isfahan 500 years ago. This is a necessity of our day and age. I'm so glad also that you did the interview with Alexander Dugin. Because on the Christian side, there are very few people. There are some, unfortunately, but not as many as there are in the Islamic tradition, who are concerned with this depth of importance of its multiplicity of religions and what to do with it and remain religious at the same time. How to accept other religions without losing the certainty of your own religion, without decreasing your iman rather than increasing it. This is the great problem. And many Christians have that, and I feel sorry for them. I've told them because Christianity is so Christocentric. That's what's called Christianity. For us Muslims, it's based on God. We're not called Mohammedanism. We don't accept that term. I've said that so many times on so many occasions. Why was it that we get angry when Christian Orientalists used to call our religion Mohammedanism? But Christians don't get angry if I call Christianity Christianity, as a Muslim scholar. That's because Christianity is Christocentric, Islam is theocentric. And being theocentric, for us, it is much easier to respect the other times when God has said I, the other revelations, the other ways of approaching Him. And it's not accidental, it's by God's providence that the only religion in the world before modern times had contact with all the major religions of the world except the American Indian, which was another part of the world nobody had contact with, was Islam. Christianity had contact with Islam. Islam surrounded it, and some Judaism within itself. Chinese tradition, Hinduism, the same. Islam, on the one hand, had contact with Hinduism and Buddhism in India and Central Asia, with Confucianism and Taoism when it went to China, with, of course, Judaism and Christianity, which remissed it, with the primal African religions when it went to Africa, especially West Africa, and also to some extent East Africa, mostly West Africa. We are the only religion that's been blessed by God to have had an experience of the multiplicity of religions before modernism. Now, of course, because of modernism, the Christians sit on a plane and go to China and Japan and so on and so on. But we're the only ones. It's a very, very important treasury. And that's also why what's called comparative religion today was the science that was invented by Muslims. Abu Rayhan al-Biruni, the famous Persian polymath,
تحقيق ما للهند من مقولة مقبولة.
كتاب تحقيق ما للهند that he wrote on India is considered to be the foundational book of what's called comparative religion today. And so many people, Shahrastani, this, that, they could, were actually writing about comparative religion. All the books of Milal wa Nahal have chapters on Christianity and Judaism and Zoroastrianism, some on Hinduism, and so on and so on. You never saw something like that in medieval European literature. Just didn't exist. So God put Islam in the middle belt of the world, and also the first civilization that had and religion that contact the diversity of religions of the world, from east to west, from the Pacific to the Atlantic. And it's paradoxical that now, as Muslims, especially now, we try to revive Islam through this Salafiyya movement and so on and so on. Instead of taking advantage of this great opening, we're closing it. We're closing it, which is really a tragedy.
So we were in the middle so that we could gain wisdom from all other traditions. الحكمة ضالة المؤمن. And we should get rid from تعصب الكبر ونزعنا ما في صدورهم من غل. So we should seek wherever there is virtue or beauty and then gain
Right.
from it also. Professor, one important idea here that people like Guénon and Chouon and Martin Lings, at the end of the day, they also chose Islam as a path. And also the rituals, praying and fasting. So, do you believe that they discovered that the updated version or the most beautiful version of all these traditions is Islam at the end of the day? So they found their final shelter with Islam only.
Yes, that's true. That's true. Actually, once you talk about tradition, which means to take religion seriously, one has to realize to take religion seriously is not only to read about it in serious books, to know theoretically, but also to be it, to practice it. You have to find a way. You have to find a way. It's both a doctrine and a method. You have to find a method, a way. And for example, Hinduism is very rich intellectually, metaphysically, but you cannot become a Hindu. That is, not if you're Orthodox. And the traditionalists are all very, very Orthodox. They believe in the authenticity of each religion, not in the deviations that also every religion has experienced. That they are Orthodox in not the sense of Greek Orthodox Church, but Orthodox in the universal sense of it. And they realize that to be Orthodox, one has also to be universalist, not only limited. And was their function. It was really their function. And so all of these great authorities who wrote about religion have done more than anyone else to revive the intellectual and metaphysical aspect of religion in the West, embrace Islam, because you cannot become a Hindu. Christianity did not offer the possibility. All came from Christian background, but did not offer a sapiental dimension. Had been forgotten a long, long time ago. Otherwise, the modernism would not have come about. They could not embrace Judaism. You really cannot become a Jew. It's impossible. It's extremely difficult. And and also there was no wisdom in there. The only two possibilities that were open were Islam and Buddhism. And it was providential that, in fact, the revival of tradition in the West came not from the Islamic world, from Islam. And René Guénon was the founder of the traditional school. He was born in 1887, at a time when a lot of Europeans were searching elsewhere. The intelligent Europeans had realized there was something wrong with modernism. Already people were interested in going to India and to other places and studying other teachings and so on and so on. He, very early in life, encountered the person who had been a disciple of a great Egyptian sheikh, Eliyash al-Kabir from Cairo. His name was Abdul Hadi, who introduced him to Islam. But also, that began his quest really for religion and spiritual life, but he didn't take Islam that seriously at that time, but just in his mind, I'm nominally a Muslim. But then he also had a visit, very mysterious visit. Nobody ever has found out who these people were. Two men who came from India, who had been sent by the sadhus and by the pundits and so on of India to go meet Gano, and who taught him actually the Hindu doctrines. So a young Frenchman writing Introduction to Study of Hindu Doctrines in Paris is like as if I were to write a Russian novel better than Tolstoy. I don't know any Russian. And how could this be possible? It was actually transmitted knowledge. He didn't go out reading books and write that. It was given to him. And so he, started by writing these books about Hinduism and then gradually criticizing the modern world, a great masterpiece, Christ of the Modern World. He wrote in 1927, and other works, and began to expound metaphysics. But what happened was that, in fact, he had no interest in Buddhism whatsoever. He thought Buddhism was a Hindu heresy, because those men who come from India to introduce him to Hinduism had the Hindu perspective on Buddhism. And it was really Marco Pallis, the Greek writer and musician, a philosopher and theologian who lived in Paris, was a good friend of mine, a remarkable man himself, who had gone to Tibet and discovered Tibetan Buddhism, but a Tibetan Buddhist, who convinced that Buddhism was an Orthodox traditional religion. And so, but in his later works, took out this part that Buddhism was a kind of heresy of Hinduism. Of course, from the point of Hinduism, Buddhism is a heresy. Like from the point of Judaism, Christianity is a heresy of Judaism. And Orthodox traditional Judaism. When Christianity first began, the rabbis said that. Now they don't say that, of course, anymore. But this had to change, and changed. But that he would become a Buddhist, that was not a possibility. Of the great traditional writers, the only one who became Buddhist was Marco Pallis, and that is because he went to Tibet. Before Tibet was taken over by the Chinese Communist government, it was a completely traditionalist society. He was deeply impressed by the remarkable presence of a complete traditional society in religion, in rights, in food, in clothing, in art, in everything, architecture, everything, and he became a Buddhist, Tibetan Buddhist, and wrote the book Pigs and Lamas, which became a classic. Otherwise, all of the other people who became interested in tradition became Muslim. Himself was the founder of the School of Tradition, was invited in 1930 by a French woman who resided in Cairo to go to Cairo to see some of the manuscripts of the Arabic, which Guénon had become interested in and wanted to translate into French. And so Guénon went to, his French wife had died. Guénon went to Cairo. He never came back. He stayed there, spent the last 20 years of his life there. His French wife had died. He married an Egyptian woman. He had 4 children from her. He lived completely as an Egyptian. He wore a long thobe, and you saw him in the street, they would think he was a Frenchman. And he's buried near Seyyed Hossein in the middle of Cairo. And his tomb is there now. So he just went back to the Islamic world. The question to go on is very interesting, because he had read Guénon. I became very much interested in tradition, and he had studied Hinduism. Islam was very much attracted to Hinduism, but he had to become a Hindu. So he was in Paris. He was 20 years old, and although he was from Germany originally, but German. Sean was racially German, not French, but he was in Paris, and he has a little apartment not very far from the Paris Mosque in the middle of Paris near the Seine, near Notre Dame. And he came out of his little apartment, still there, I've seen it. He said, the first sign of a religion that I see, I'm going to embrace it. He knew that he had to follow a religion. His parents had been Christian, but a lot of Europeans were diluted in their religion and they didn't know what to do, but he had respect for all the different religions. And the natural thing that would be that I would meet a priest or someone like that. But at that time, France had colonies in North Africa. And there was a special guard, Algerians, dressed in complete Islamic dress, were guards for the president of France. And he came out of his apartment and he looked, and there were 100 Muslims with turbans and swords and stuff marching down the street. And that was a sign. He converted to Islam. He went to the Paris Mosque, became a Muslim, and then he wanted to find a spiritual teacher. And he went to Marseille. He wanted to go to North Africa. They didn't have any money, didn't know what to do. And as he was standing looking at the Mediterranean, somebody tapped him on the shoulder and said, the person whom you're looking for is Sheikh al-Alawi, and he resides in Mustaqanam. Go to Mustaqanam, Algeria. Mysterious event. And so he went and stayed in Algeria for a while, and it was there that he was received to Sufism, became himself, of course, a great Sufi master and also teacher. And so all of these people, except for Kumaraswamy, Ananda Kumaraswamy, who was from a Hindu family, from a Brahmanic family from Sri Lanka. His father was a sir, knighted by the British, and he wanted to go back to Hinduism. But all the others, all the famous writers.
Very interesting, and thank you for sharing this information, Professor Seyyed. Seyyed, you mentioned Imam Ali, so let me ask you here about Imam Ali ibn Abi Talib. What are the unique characteristics of Shia spirituality in specific, or Imam Ali? Because we have Dua Kumail, we have Al-Munajat Sha'baniya, we have Nahj al-Balagha, we have these very deep spiritual states of Imam Ali, and he's the person that is beloved from all Sufis, from all Muslims.
Well, you really asked two questions. What is Imam Ali and what is my relation with him? But anyway, I shall answer both, especially the first part. Of course, Imam Ali is without doubt the most important of the Sahaba of the Prophet, as far as his influence is concerned. Of course, Abu Bakr became the first caliph and was also very close to the Prophet. And after Ali comes Abu Bakr, but the influence of Ali has been much greater globally for the last 14 centuries than that of the first caliph, Abu Bakr. Ali was really a very exceptional figure. We know of no one in Islamic history who was an excellent warrior, very, very famous warrior, would defeat the biggest warriors of Jahiliyyah in sword fighting and this battle. He was the most eloquent writer of Arabic. His book is called Nahj al-Balagha. Still, if you want to get your PhD in Arabic at the University of Cairo, you have to read the Nahj al-Balagha. It's the peak of perfection of Arabic prose. After the Quran, there's no book like it. No, the Quran, of course, was the word of God. That's transcendent. But human language, that's really the model, has been for 1400 years. He was, true. He's considered to be the founder of all the crafts and the inventor of Islamic calligraphy. The Kufic handwriting was invented by Ali. The fact that Seyyed, we don't know, but the fact that it's said, there must be something there that people have said that. He's the founder of all the guilds in Islamic history, Sunni and Shiite. And the only thing he was not successful in was diplomacy. A warrior saint. Otherwise, he would not have gone to battle with Muawiyah, who would not have been fooled by Muawiyah in the battle of Siffin, which led to his death finally. But so he had these perfections all assembled together. And he lived simply. He used to go on sometimes through streets. He lived in poverty. Ali ibn Abi Talib lived in poverty. He lived very, very simply. And he represents really the wedding between spiritual and military or operational perfection. It was both after the Prophet, the founder of sanctity in Islam, Walaya, the tree of Walaya grows from him, and at the same time, the greatest warrior of Islam. This is an unbelievable combination. Christians cannot understand that because Christ was not a holy warrior. He said, he who uses the sword shall perish by the sword. But Islam is an integrated religion which takes every aspect into consideration, including the aspect of war as part of human history, human life, and so tries to pass laws for it. The laws, and you're just gonna go and kill everybody and so forth. A bomb, for example, thrown. It's against Islamic law because it kills women, children, innocent people. According to Islamic law, there are laws for battle. You should not kill women and children and old people who are not battling and so forth. So it's a whole world of war, battle, and Ali is the great knight. But a knight who composed the best poetry of the Arabic language, was a metaphysician also, who was a thinker of the deepest kind, who was a saint, founder of sanctity. My teacher in Iran, Allah, والتعددية, wrote a beautiful little book, first in Arabic and then in Persian, Ali والحكمة الإلهية. Ali and حكمة الإلهية, which means Islamic philosophy. And it shows that Ali is the founder of Islamic philosophical thought. So this is a remarkable figure. We have had very few figures like this in human history. Except there's one field of diplomacy which the Prophet had, he did not have. Muslims consider him to be the peak of everything else put together. Put together. I mean, can you imagine a warrior on his horseback who would compose such eloquent poetry? That's unbelievable. Unbelievable. And has such humility, the way he treated his children. Everything he did was a lesson. Now, Shiism, in a sense, is the Shia of Ali, the son of the Qadr, because the Prophet called it that. The word was Shia, was Shi'at al-Ali originally, and Ali dropped and the word Shia remained. The word Shia means partisan of, or follower of Ali ibn Abi Talib alayhi salam.
أتباع. So أتباع علي. الشيعة هم الأتباع. أتباع علي, the followers. Yeah.
That's right. That's right. Yeah. Partisan follower Shia means that. Yes. Yes. But so the Ali part dropped, but that's what Shia meant. And this was the name that the Prophet gave to the followers of Ali. That means during the lifetime of the Prophet already, there were a number of the Sahaba who were Ali's followers. And the Prophet did not say, no, you should not be Ali's followers. Not at all. He gave them a name. So some of the Christians that Sunnis make, this was a later invention of the Persians against this kind of thing. Orientalists have followed. It's total nonsense. Both Sunnism and Shiism go back to the heart of Islam. They go back to the soul of the Prophet. The spiritual reality of the Rashidun, as well as Ali and the Imams, are in the heart of the Prophet, the inner reality of the Prophet. That's the important thing for us to realize.
Very interesting. Professor, you mentioned Allama الطباطبائي, and I'll take the opportunity here to ask you about one of your great or important memories with Allama Tabatabai. He was one of the great Urafa in our modern history, and they talk about him that he had a very pure heart, and he loved Hafid too much. And he was saying that after Hafid, we have only Hafid as a great mystic poet. So tell us a memory that comes to your mind about Allama and his great personality. And even you recommended him to have the dialogue between with Henry Corbin. So just let us talk a bit about him.
Yes, I could spend the rest of my life talking about Allama Tabatabai. I came to Iran back from Harvard when I was finishing my PhD in 1958, the fall of 1958. A couple of months later, in the house of a friend, I met Allama Tabatabai. And I was very deeply impressed by him from the very beginning. And he was teaching a course, actually, in Islamic philosophy on Thursdays and Fridays every other week in Tehran. He would come from Qom. I started to attend those. I went there for years, attending those courses. And it was, when Corbin came to Iran during the fall, they finally met and they started to have a dialogue together. At first, Dr. Isa Sabahbudi was professor of French at Tehran University, was the translator. And once I came back to Iran, and I met Corbin, I became good friends, and we written many things together. I became the main translator. For years and years, when Corbin would come, we would have meetings which would last during the fall season. Because about Christmas time, Corbin would go back to France and would then teach at the Sorbonne for the spring and term until the summer. And then would come again in September until or December, those months. There used to be these meetings every other week with Allama Tabatabai, and each year some theme would be chosen for discussion, in which I was, I said, the main translator. I would translate from French into Persian, Allama Tabatabai, and from Persian into French for Corbin to understand. Although Corbin knew some Persian, but nevertheless it wasn't that strong, and also hard of hearing. He would put his hearing aid on the table to hear and had to shout. But anyway, out of those discourses come those 2 volumes, which I think you alluded to now, in Persian, and on the conversations of Arne Corbin and Allama Tabatabai, but also many other things. First of all, a number of people came to those sessions, including Murtaza Mutahari, who unfortunately was assassinated at the beginning of the Iranian Revolution, but then also a student of Ayatollah Khomeini, and several other young ulama who became very famous people, including Dinani, who's still alive, who's one of the leading Islamic philosophers in Iran today, is my age, and several other people would come up from Qom and Tehran, among the young ulama of Tehran. And then later Dariush Shaigan, the famous Iranian writer who died a short while ago, I brought him there, and he also knew French very well, and I forced him to do his PhD and left France in order to come and meet me, and didn't finish PhD for a while like my student, and I had a Corbin direct his PhD thesis, so I went to Paris and did it troisième cycle. He was very good in French, very, very good in French, and his Persian improved. He was a very good linguist, mashallah, Sanskrit, Sanskrit quite well.
Even Izutso, I guess Izutso was there at the time.
Yeah, that's another story, yes. Izutso had nothing to do with Allama Tabatabai. They never met. But he met Corbin, of course, because when I founded the Imperial Academy of Philosophy, I employed both Corbin and Izutsu as professors there. They both retired, and they were from their universities in Japan and France, and I'd employed them, paid them salary, and they would spend half the year there. That's another story. But anyway, when Allama Tabatabai was there, but Corbin was no longer there, it's mostly I, sometimes with consulting with Shaigan and others, would choose classical texts such as the Upanishads, the Tao Te Ching, works of these great classical works of other religions, and we would translate it into Persian, and Allama Tawai would comment upon it. It was really quite absolutely remarkable, absolutely remarkable. So these were, there was a really unique occasion that nearly had taken place since the Middle Ages, to have a scholar of the Little Korban from the West to have these long, long discourses with a scholar from the East of the level of Allama Tawai. Allama Tawai had certain qualities which are very, very important, and I would want to say, now that I'm talking to you, it should be known for posterity. I've spoken about it elsewhere, but I shall mention it to you. First of all, the Shiite ulama in Iran usually do not associate with the Sufi orders. There's a kind of tension there. Although secretly, some of them are members of Sufi orders. And there are also a Sufi order both in Al-Azhar University and in Qom, without a name really, which the ulama follow. People do not know about this. That's all I can say about it. But anyway, when Allama Tabatabai was studying in Najaf, he met actually a famous Sufi, Sheikh Wahid, who initiated him into Sufism. And he was a practicing Sufi, but never spoke about it. Well, he was a person of a high spiritual character. And while in Najaf, for 3 years, he observed the Sawm al-Kalam, the fasting of speaking. He did not speak for 3 years. And so there was a kind of silence about the speech when you spoke to him. And that remained quite remarkable. The element of silence, contemplation. He spoke always with a very low voice, very, very low voice, and very deliberately. But he had been actually a Sufi, and I'm only telling you 2 episodes about him, which is very famous. I just got criticized in Iran recently for it. Once I took a lesson in summer with him, alone, in Daraka, outside of Tehran, by the mountains, on Diwan Hafiz. And he would read a Ghazal of Hafiz and comment upon it. The walls were all speaking. You cannot imagine. It's a metaphysical world, just the 2 of us. Just the 2 of us. He revealed some of his inner reality, which he would not for other students. And the commentaries he made upon Hafiz, this idiotic Persians who think that Hafiz is just talking about physical one and beautiful women. They don't know what they're talking about. Every verse of Hafiz is a drop of metaphysical truth instilled in worldly form. It's unbelievable. This man, an alim, professor of Qom, with the turban on his head, being able to talk about Hafiz like this. I've seen all the great teachers about Hafiz in Iran or elsewhere. Nobody could match him. But this is something that should be known about him. He could have written the most profound commentary upon the Diwan of Hafiz anybody ever wrote. But this part he always hit. Also, in relation to this, once in a while he and I would go for a walk in the countryside. And I'm very much aware of the spiritual reality of nature. I've written more than anyone else about this among Muslim writers, and you perhaps know some of my works on this issue. He and I were taking a walk, a beautiful walk, near Damavand, outside of Tehran, in the woods. Very, very, very beautiful. And you could feel the presence of God in the forest. You could feel the spiritual presence. There was some hudur of divine grace, divine reality around you. And Allama Tabatabai and I were talking about this, as if we were going through kind of angelic world. And 2 people came far away. So Dr. Nasr, look, as soon as they come close, nature will hide the spiritual aspect. That these people are not qualified to see that spiritual aspect. And that's exactly what happened. the worldly people from Tehran taking a walk. As soon as they went away again, it's like the curtain opening up again, and the spiritual quality of nature came back. This is another experience I had with Allah. He was very sensitive to this. I will end with this. My talk, I've talked enough, but with this. Allah passed away, died in 1981, 2 years after the revolution. When he was on his deathbed in Qom, he died in Qom. He asked one of my very close friends, Persian, whom I'd taken to see Allah several times, who was a very spiritual person, a very good person, to come and see. Allah was lying on the ground, and when he came in, told his son and everybody to leave the room. And it went like this. And this man came close by. He stood the lapel of his coat and bent it down like this, so that his ear came close to the mouth of Allah. And he said, I have a message I want you to give to Dr. Nasr. Tell him that the torch of knowledge has been extinguished in Iran. Try to keep that torch burning where he is until the torch in Iran can be lit again. I hate to say this, but it makes everybody in Iran, the ulama today, very angry, but that's the last message Allah for me. It's a historical thing. I cannot lie. I don't want to go to my grave by not having said what he asked. And so I've tried to keep the torch of knowledge as much as possible burning until, inshallah, it's lit in Iran again. But it's being lit in Iran again. Good young people coming up, inshallah.
Very interesting. Professor, thank you for sharing these secrets, these memories, this knowledge. در ختام بزبان فارسی مثلا از كل این شاعران بزرگ حافظ، سعدی، مولانا، نمیدونم فردوسی، کدوم شخصیت برای شما بیشتر میپسندید، بیشتر احساس تجربه معنوی خاصی و بزبان فارسی اگر جواب میدید؟
از لحاظ بزرگان ادب فارسی من خب همیشه خیلی به مولانا ارادت دارم، ولی در این سن که دیگه بارها مصطفی همینا رو خوندم و میخوام شعر بخونم یه غزل حافظ میخونم.